Hi, it's Kirby Summers, and I welcome you to the Epstein Project podcast. Today I'm going to be on episode 7 of Bill Gates. Yes, episode 7. So while mainstream media has been stuck on episode 1, which has really revealed nothing, I'm on episode 7, and I could probably do another 70. Before I get started, I want to thank you guys for being amazing followers, for leaving these incredible comments that make me continue to dig and dig and dig and go through my notes, which I have had for a very long time. Because you know what? It's sort of like I feel like this is a team effort. Um, and as a team effort, I want to thank my sponsor, Dr. Vicky from a new med spa in Rochester, Minneapolis. If you happen to be in Minneapolis for their world famous healthcare procedures, including the Mayo Clinic, give her a call, medspa.clinic. She offers incredible services that can be, pain free, that can be done in a day or two, that will reverse the clock 10 years in 1 or 2 visits. So again, Dr. Vicky from a new med spa in Rochester, Minneapolis, and give her a hand. My God, just to stand behind this kind of advocacy against very wealthy predators, very well-connected predators. That takes a lot of guts. So bravo and thank you, Dr. Vicky, from me to you. Okay, so I want to get started with my episode on Bill Gates. I've been sitting on sort of like, I get tips, and I get tips very often from different people. And I kind of didn't really know what to do with this tip. Bill Gates was not necessarily in the media. The divorce has kind of exploded this balloon, and it's just literally shaking the secrets inside the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and Leslie Wexner trafficking ring. And so I had gotten this among many other tips. I got one almost a year ago about Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold bribing Apple's attorneys Weil Gotzel and Monges, I think that's how to pronounce it. I'm not exactly clear on that, to clock out the patents. Apparently, so that I can explain what was going on, um, Apple sued Microsoft. Microsoft is owned, as you know, by Bill Gates for infringing on copyrights. That is not the first time that Bill Gates has been sued for infringing on copyrights. That's one of many times. Um, Myhrvold is known in the tech community as somebody who chases patents the way a bad attorney is an ambulance chaser. So that's how he's known in the tech community. And so the tip was that Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold bribed Apple's attorneys to clock out the patents. So that it means that instead of representing Apple the way they are legally required to do because they're working on their dime, they took money, allegedly, from Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold. And remember, Gates and Myhrvold have been working together since the 1980s. They're very close. To kind of like, keep this lawsuit going. And then the patents expired in 2012, and because they expired, oh well, we tried the best we could. Sorry, Apple, we lost. And guess what? Microsoft wins. And so well, there are a lot of interesting things about this tip that I'm kind of like looking into again was that this person who claims to be an insider, who claims to have worked with Apple, Steve Jobs, and knows everybody in the tech community, and actually showed me some proof about the association, the long-term association within the tech community, and correspondence between these people in the tech community, which I will leave unnamed for the time being, told me that um, Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold were clients, paying clients of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Leslie Wexner's child trafficking ring. So that what's interesting is many things, and I'm going to try to lay it out in a careful way. The attorneys that were bribed allegedly by Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold are Weil, Gottschall, and Manges, who also happened to be Leslie Wexner's attorneys and who were also Jeffrey Epstein's attorneys. Now, just a side note, um, in 2008, one of the attorneys for this law firm, one of the head attorneys, J. Philip Rosen, accompanied Leslie Wexner and George W. Bush to Israel to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the beginning of Israel. And, so he was invited, which I thought was interesting. J. Philip Rosen is also, coincidentally, an outside counsel for Donald Trump. So that's, we're listening and we're hearing a lot of the same names. Um, so that if in fact Gates and Nathan Myhrvold are guilty of allegedly bribing Apple's attorneys, um, that would not be like a patent infringement. That would constitute a RICO crime. At least that's how it's been explained to me. Um, so, it was curious because the information I received indicated that if there was going to be a hit, if someone was going to be murdered, it would be Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell or Leslie Wexner because they created this mess. And it would, I'm just going to read what I what I was sent, that it would piss off Mossad, the CIA, because they would have to protect Sergey Brin, Larry Page. They would have to protect Bill Gates and Tim Cook. Okay, well, guess what happened? Jeffrey Epstein died. All right, well, let's review the Jeffrey Epstein dying scenario. Jeffrey Epstein, if you recall, was arrested on July 6, 2019. He had been tipped off. He was in Paris. He told his butler, his houseman, that he was going to be arrested when he arrived in New York. But he had already been through the same scenario back in 2008 when he fled to Israel, because he did flee to Israel before he turned himself in. And he didn't really serve time. He went to day jail. He was allowed to leave between 8 in the morning and 8 o'clock at night. The jail cell was not locked. I mean, if anybody had a more lenient uh, sentence, it would be like nobody. It would just be Jeffrey Epstein. And so, even though he was tipped off that he was going to be arrested, Epstein felt he was above the law. Why did he feel he was above the law? because, as Alexander Acosta said, he was an intelligence asset and he had been told to back off. Plus, he had all this dirt on people allegedly like Bill Gates, who is currently being divorced by Melinda Gates based on reports that she became upset at a New York Times article of 2019, making her understand that Gates was spending a lot more time with Jeffrey Epstein than he had let on to initially. I have made 6 other podcasts about them. I will include that in the description box below. While you're at it, please like the video, please subscribe, because I always forget to ask you to do that. Okay, so on July 23rd, 2019, a couple of weeks after he was arrested, um, Jeffrey Epstein was found like almost dead on the floor in his jail cell. His cellmate was this beefy ex-cop named Nicholas Tartaglione, who had been put in jail because he murdered 4 people uh, for a coke deal gone bad. And it is claimed, alleged, that he killed the first one tying like this Ziploc thing around his neck, so essentially killing him by strangulation. Um, but Nicholas Tartaglione's attorneys turned around and said, hey, no, um, Nicholas Tartaglione saved his life. So we have Jeffrey Epstein, who told the New York Post through his attorneys, I am afraid for my life. This guy tried to kill me. And then we have Tartaglione's attorneys telling the press, no, Nicholas Tartaglione actually tried to save his life. Okay. So, shortly thereafter, Jeffrey Epstein does 2 things. The first thing, and it was only in the news for one day, the first thing was when he went before the judge, he was already making a plea. He was going to name the people who had paid to use his services, meaning the alleged trafficked victims of this trafficking ring. He was going to name the people who paid, not the people that he lent out the trafficked victims, but the people who had paid. According to the tip that I received, 2 of those people would have been Epstein and Meervold. Okay, so he made the statement. It made the news for one day. He was going to do this for a reduced sentence of 5 years. And then the second thing that he did was he sat down with his attorneys, Darren Indyke, who, by the way, used to be Leslie Wexner's attorney, and he has also been an attorney for Ghislaine Maxwell, and Richard Kahn. He sat down with them about 36 hours, like not a full 2 days before he was found dead and it was deemed a suicide. He sat down with them and created a will, a last will and testament, um, transferring his assets to the 1953 trust, named after the year that he was born. Okay, so he creates a will, last will and testament, creating the 1953 trust, the year that he was born. Well, that's interesting. So the year that he was born, last will and testament, to the day he dies. He transfers at that time $578 million to the 1953 trust. And He names the trustees of his will. He names Darren Indike. He names Richard Kahn. They're to receive $250,000 each as compensation for being the executors of his estate. But he also names a third person. And that third person is a close friend of Bill Gates. He named Boris Nikolic. So let me just find, yeah. So he names Boris Nikolic, who at the time was a 49-year-old biotech venture capitalist, as one of the three executors of Epstein's estate um, when he died. Okay, well, as I said, Bill Gates and Boris Nikolic are very close friends. In fact, Nikolic shows up in that photograph that was in the New York Times showing Larry Summers, Jeffrey Epstein, Les Staley, Bill Gates, and Boris Nikolic in Epstein's Upper East Side mansion, standing there. And so Nikolic turns around and he says, I'm shocked. I'm shocked to be named as backup executor of Epstein's will. Um, I was not consulted for this. I did not know about this. I have no intent to fulfill these duties whatsoever. And Nikolic said this to Bloomberg, the news station, the news media thing, who went ahead and published this. And so, I was always curious about that. And I knew that the connection between Gates and Epstein was like way far deeper than mainstream media had portrayed or that Gates had ever let on. But with the new information that I discovered, it dawned on me, if Bill Gates was indeed a paying customer, well, then it occurred to me that by naming Boris Nikolic, who is very close to Bill Gates, that perhaps Epstein was concerned that Bill Gates, and this is a theory of mine, it's not etched in stone, that perhaps Bill Gates was going to kill Epstein and he had already been warned and he was concerned. And so he left as a clue the name of Boris Nikolic on his last will and testament. And I'll tell you why I think this. So the first thing I'm going to say is that when I was almost killed, um, and I was held for 5 days at knife point, the police would not come. I didn't understand that at the time that the police could be bought off. I contacted 911 twice. Twice they basically told me they were not coming, which I thought was absurd at the time. The man entered into my apartment at some point after, I just thought the police was going to be here, but they just never showed up. I managed to talk him out of his rage. He was covered in blood and soot, and he had this large it was larger than a knife. It was I think maybe like a machete, but I don't remember. It was a very large knife. And he told me that he was here to kill me. He was going to kill me. And I managed to distract him, and he held me for 5 days until I was able to escape. So when I escaped, I'm not going to bore you with the details right now. It's in my book, The Billionaire's Woman. So again, that's on my website. So when I escaped, I went to Los Angeles. I had 3 friends living there at the time. I did not listen to my abuser, who basically said, do not go anywhere where you don't know anyone. Go somewhere where you don't know anyone. Do not take a direct flight. Just, here's $1,000. In those days, a ticket anywhere at the same time was $600. So, like, where was I going? I guess I wasn't going to go too far because I would have been dead. So, in any event, I didn't listen to him. I just needed to be with my friends. I needed to feel safe, and I went to Los Angeles where I had friends, and shortly thereafter, I had a name change because I was terrified that I would be found and that I would be murdered. Now, I was not thinking when I had the name change 100% that Rickless was responsible. All of my friends who had met him and who knew him, they basically sat me down and tried to deprogram me because I must have been programmed. And they said to me, you were set up, you were set up. He tried to kill you. Take precaution. In any event, while I was still not believing it at the time, when I changed my name legally, I decided as a measure of precaution to use the name of one of his 2 daughters. And that name is Talia. So I used the name Talia as my middle name so that in the event it was actually Rickless who tried to have me killed, and they then succeeded in killing me again, I would leave behind for the police a clue as to who would be have been my murderer. Now, if you guys remember the 1997 movie LA Confidential, with Kevin Spacey, who happens to be Jeffrey Epstein's friend and Ghislaine Maxwell's friend, and who we have seen sitting on the royal thrones at Buckingham Palace, and who also accompanied Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein and everybody to that trip to Africa. I believe it was in 2004. And if it's not 2004, do me a favor, just in the comments section, let me know what year that was. So Kevin Spacey plays a LA police guy. He plays a cop, and the cop's name is Jack Vincennes, and he invents this name Rollo Tomasi. And it's interesting because when I wrote down that I thought that Epstein was using Nikolic's name as a clue as to who may have murdered him, one of my followers, I just was just so happy to see this, suggested, Rollo Tomasi. And right away I knew, because that's a memorable movie for me for reasons, of the same kind of thing. You leave behind a clue in the event somebody kills you. Well, what's the clue? In this case, the character that Kevin Spacey plays is a police officer whose name is Jack Vincennes. He gets shot by a dirty cop, right? Um, who killed the person that the Kevin Spacey character has sort of named, given this fictitious name, Rollo Tomasi. So after he is shot, the killer comes up to him and mumbles something to him, and he replies as he's dying the name Rollo Tomasi. So then that's basically the tip, the clue to all of the police officers working the case with him, that this guy who knows and who heard him say Rollo Tomasi is the bad guy. And so that kind of brings me back to, did Jeffrey Epstein insert Nicholas Nicholas's name there. I'm sorry, Boris's name as his third, the third guy as a clue. I think yes. It's very likely. I think yes. The other thing I discovered was, since 1991, Bill Gates begins to work collaboratively with Israel. And primarily, what he's doing is he's providing defense and spying capabilities. And so instead of calling it war games, which is really what it is, Microsoft calls it security. 1991 is the same year that Leslie Wexner gives to Jeffrey Epstein power of attorney over all of his billions of dollars, right? And kind of that's not the beginning of their friendship, but oddly enough, 1991 is also the year that Bill Gates starts to work collaboratively with Israel. And in addition to providing war services, um, he is also providing services for all of the prisons in the United States and all of the prisons worldwide. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I mean, so he has a contract, apparently under a different company name, where he has access to every prison in the United States, where he has access to every prison anywhere in the world. Does anybody know that? Apparently the answer is no, right? So, God, all right, so he has access to the prisons, he has access to everybody who's anyone because he would have to be in charge and connect to the higher ups who run the prison system, and he would have had to at some point been connected to William Barr, who's also part of this kind of like gatekeeper. He plays this gatekeeper role. All right, so let's go back and remember in 2014 that email written by Joey Ito, who was the MIT Media Lab director, who says that Bill Gates was directed by Epstein to donate $2 million to the research lab, right? October of 2014. Joey Ito then does all kinds of things within the department. They try not to name Gates, and then afterwards they try not to name Epstein very much because they still want to get this money, which I believe was for research purposes for war, and for AI, which again is a war tool. So that's what I think they were doing with these universities like Harvard and MIT, not dissimilar to the MK Ultra program of the 1950s, where the United States government created corporations, fake corporations, through which they funneled money into the schools, the universities, hospitals, the prisons, and where unsuspecting victims were experimented on. And they did this at that time, through fake corporations. Well, Jeffrey Epstein was a fake corporation. That's how I look at him. He was not a, he was not someone like Mark Zuckerberg, let's say, who went from being a college kid at Harvard to creating Facebook to having an IPO to becoming a wealthy person. No, when he was at attending, I believe it was attending NYU, and he didn't graduate from any of these schools, by the way. He was driving a taxi cab, and he was also working as a roofer. Now, it's my opinion that he was sort of tapped at some point because he was 16 years old when he graduated from high school. 16. He was pretty smart. He was pretty good in math. I believe he was tapped early on. Intelligence agencies kept an eye on him. And I know that he worked through my research and my interviews with different people who have known Jeffrey Epstein. I understand that he's worked with different spies on different levels, but he also worked, and he used to say this all the time, that he worked for the CIA. Well, I believe he did. But then, of course, we have Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father is a legit and outed Mossad agent. And so we have Ghislaine Maxwell, and we have the fact that Epstein often went to Israel, and we have his connection to Leslie Wexner, who was an avid supporter of Israel. And so they're the ally of the United States. Um, it's well known in the community that the United States does turn a blind eye in the event Israel does anything that's offensive to anyone. And so I believe that to get back to Bill Gates, it's very likely that Gates and Meervold were possibly paying for these services to Epstein, and that $2 million was payment. It was payment, and or it was a blackmail payment, and it was directed to MIT labs for whatever program, nefarious program, that Epstein was working on because of his contacts with intelligence. And so I am going to leave this podcast here and ask you for your comments. I'm curious to know what you think about this. Do you think that perhaps he used the third executor, Boris Nikolic, as a clue? Do you think that it's possible that instead of Bill Clinton and or Prince Andrew and or Hillary Clinton, do you think it's possible that it was Bill Gates who possibly, allegedly, maybe, theoretically, had Jeffrey Epstein killed? I know that in the tip I received, it said, if anybody's going to get killed, it's going to be Epstein, it's going to be Ghislaine Maxwell, or it's going to be Leslie Wexner, but it's not going to be the tech guys, because the tech guys now they really do work for intelligence, as you know. I mean, Edward Snowden told you that much, right? So anyway, I want to thank you for listening. Please leave your comments. I want to hear from you. And we will do this again. Okay, have a good day. Bye.